atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and today we have another interview for our Godzilla month. Godzilla month has brought us a ton of content coming, and this is our second of two interviews that we are doing this month. This time around, we are not only celebrating the 70th anniversary of Godzilla, but 10 years ago on this day, we saw the release of a fan film that was once labeled, quote, one of the most ambitious kaiju fan films of the 21st century, end quote. And whenever I realized that we were hitting the 10-year mark on this very monumental fan film, I felt like it was only necessary to interview somebody who worked very hard for a very long time to produce such a film and still stands on its own as probably the most ambitious kaiju fan film made in the West. So without further ado, I'm going to let him introduce himself here, Mr. Billy Dubose.
Thank you very much. I'm Billy Dubose, director of Godzilla Battle Royale, also a member of Dojo Studios in G-Fest, and I also help you guys out at Kaiju United whenever you need me.
Now, Billy, first, let me ask you this. You know, I established here 10 years ago that was released, your film.
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel like 10 years has passed?
Kind of yes and no. I mean, yeah, it's been a long time, but there's times it seems I only just released it just yesterday.
Now, just so we can get a bit more of a background on you, and plus, I haven't heard this either yet, so I'm really curious. So, obviously, it's a Godzilla fan film. Now, all fan films have to come from a love of the source material, and as I can see by what you're wearing, what you've got in your background here, you are a fan. Now, where did your fandom for Godzilla, Kaiju, Tokusatsu, where did that come from?
Well, the full origin story made short. I loved dinosaurs as a kid, and my father, when I was playing with my brother in my room upstairs, he shouted out from downstairs, "Hey, there's a dinosaur movie on TNT," and this was back when they did the dinosaur mashups on TNT's, or the Monster Vision thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a scene from Monster Zero was playing. And I saw Godzilla, I saw Rodan, and I saw Ghidorah, all trashing Tokyo. And I had always heard the name Godzilla, but I had never seen him. I had already seen King Kong at this point, and I thought it was a pretty good film, but I was more into dinosaurs. So when I'm seeing Godzilla here, I'm like, wow, he's quite cool, and he's breathing blue fire, and there's this three-headed dragon dude. Oh, I want to see them fight. And right as it was getting to the fight, my parents had told us, "Oh, we gotta go to dinner." They shut it off. I was mad, and I was so wanting to finish it. And then, but later, that wasn't my technical first film. I just saw a brief snippet of it. But then I guess I got a good grade in kindergarten on something, and my mother took me to Toys R Us, and the only movie we could find was King Kong versus Godzilla, in that gracious blue-sleeved VHS cover. So I popped it in, and I was like very excited because I'd already seen King Kong. I'm like, oh boy, King Kong and Godzilla, this is going to be a fight. And yeah, I was kind of rooting for Godzilla, even though he was the bad guy, but I still loved it. I was quite astounded by the back and forth fight they had going on there. So ever since then, I was hooked.
Now, out of curiosity, what are some of your most memorable experiences with Kaiju or Godzilla or Tokusatsu, whether it be seeing a movie in theaters or an action figure or just an experience that occurred?
Well, aside from the story I just told you, I think that same day we actually found one of those Imperial Godzillas at Toys R Us, if you remember those. And then I had gotten the Godzilla game shortly after on Nintendo. And then when I'm seeing the monster roll call, I'm like, whoa, there's more monsters here. And then it kind of became a scavenger hunt search. So I go to my local video rental store, Ken's World of Video, not Blockbuster. They had Mothra vs. Godzilla and Godzilla 1985 there. Kind of a weird small choice there, but I see Mothra vs. Godzilla. I'm like, oh, nice. This is even better than King Kong vs. Godzilla. And then there's like a... did you ever see the VHS version?
For which one?
For Mothra vs. Godzilla.
The version that has previously released as Godzilla versus the Thing, or yes.
I think they actually titled it Godzilla versus Mothra, but it was also called Godzilla versus the Thing. But this Paramount VHS release at the very end had a kind of a preview thing for more Godzilla films, and it had Godzilla's Revenge on it. And Terramech Godzilla, and I'm seeing, whoa, he's fighting more monsters. Now I got to see these. And along with that and the Nintendo game, the scavenger hunt was on, and I'm constantly going to Suncoast Video. I'm going to other video rental stores, and they're very hard to find at this time in the 80s and the 90s. Okay, I wasn't doing much reading back then, admittedly, but I was going to all the stores, looking through the catalogs, trying to ask around, what other movies are there? And just the fact that I'd find another film I didn't know about. Oh, here's Godzilla versus Gigan. Oh, here's Godzilla versus Megalon. And the last one I found that I didn't even know about was Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I'm like, oh, wow. There was Monster Zero, but there's this one, and Mothra's in it too? Oh, now I got to see this. But the funny thing about the Nintendo game, you had monsters like Ghidorah, Moguera, and Varan, and they're not really mentioned too much in the Godzilla films. And I'm like, okay, but if this is a Godzilla game, where did these other monsters come from? So I was always searching for those films. I didn't even know they had their own standalone films. I didn't even know about Destroy All Monsters until we finally got it released on VHS by, I forget what company, but yeah. I should have probably done more reading, and I probably would have found them more easily. Yeah, those are definitely my memories.
You went through the time that Godzilla really started to come back into the limelight, especially in the 90s, right? That late 90s, whenever we got films like Destroy All Monsters on VHS and DVD and whatnot.
Well, I was going to say, like, in the early 90s, it was still pretty obscure. Even though they were coming out in Japan, the last Godzilla film we got for a while was Godzilla vs. Biollante. That was released in 89 in Japan, but we didn't get it in the US until it premiered on HBO, either in 1990 or 91. I remember I went to my uncle's house because he had HBO, and we watched it there, and I was like, oh, wow, new Godzilla film. And then I was actually relieved because at Godzilla 1985, I cried as a kid. I'm not ashamed to admit this. I cried at the end because I thought Godzilla went to hell. But then when they're continuing off that, I'm like, oh, great, he didn't go to hell. He's good. But I had to wait a while. We all had to wait a while because Japan wasn't releasing from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah to Destroya until several years after, like when the TriStar Godzilla came out. That's when they started pumping them out. So we had to wait a little bit.
Now, that time period when Sony's Godzilla from 1998 came out, and the wave of stuff that also kind of both came before and after that, you know, Godzilla the series, the VHS and DVD releases of a lot of the Heisei films, Godzilla 2000, you know, the following year. Now, that time is a very interesting time frame to be a fan, because that was also the beginning of the online presence, the online fandom.
Yeah.
Now that reaction is kind of interesting. So you mentioned that you didn't read up on a lot of it. When did you start getting involved in the fandom outside of your own personal bubble that you had growing up as a kid?
Well, to kind of answer your first little question there, I finally did start reading up on it when I finally got a copy of J.D. Lee's Godzilla Compendium, which I found at Borders. And that's where the knowledge started finally rolling in. I was like, okay, Varan has a film called Varan the Unbelievable. Mogera came from a film called The Mysterians. Gazora and then all these other weird little monsters came from Space Amoeba. And, oh, wait, Destroy All Monsters? What is this? Could this be the film where all this stock footage kept coming from, but I'm wondering what film it originated from? Because as a kid, I wasn't stupid. I'm like, where is this other footage coming from? Who is this Gorosaurus guy? I like him. So, yeah, I finally, it opened me up and it wisened me up. But that was in 96 when that came out about. But then when the online presence started coming about, it was both, at first it was welcoming, but very quickly I realized how unfriendly G-fans were on the internet. I think you can relate to that somewhat.
You have no idea.
We had Barry's Temple of Godzilla, and that site was pretty cool. There was Mazer City. I only went on that site a few times, and it wasn't the friendliest. Tokyo Monsters was my favorite back in the day. It ran by James Ballard. But the unfortunate thing was when you got on those forums and you started talking to some of the fans, some of them were cool, but a lot of them you could tell were trying to, in my mind, kind of one-up each other. At least it came off that way to me. So it was a little chaotic in trying to find friends you could talk to about Godzilla, because you have to understand, as a kid, there was no kids in my neighborhood or my school or anywhere who wanted to talk about that. They were all into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I was a Turtles fan too, but it wasn't everything to me. But Turtle Mania was running wild, and what can you do? And I couldn't really talk about Godzilla, because anytime I brought it up, I got made fun of, or I got yelled at, "We don't care." I don't know if you ever experienced that, but yeah, I kind of had to hold that passion to the side and keep it private, which wasn't cool.
And I can relate to that too. That was something that I remember growing up, you know. The thing that I always heard growing up was Godzilla's not real. And it's like, okay.
I think we all figured that one out.
But that's a very interesting story, and I know a lot of people can relate. So, you know, as someone who grew up with that, and then also saw both the nice and the gnarly, we'll say, the gnarly side of the fandom, that must have been something that there's a lot of character development in all of that, and a growing desire to have something that was more of a positive than a negative. And so that kind of leads me into G-Fest, Dojo Studios, and your first project, which was constructing your Godzilla's costume, correct?
Yep. Well, let me, I kind of didn't get to G-Fest there, and I'm sorry if I'm going a mile a minute here, but G-Fest I first actually discovered in 2005, and this was when Final Wars was finally getting released in Japan, but there was kind of a leak, I remember, online where a good handful of us were able to view it real quick. I don't want to mention names or anything. We probably shouldn't have done it that way, but we were all anxious to see it. And I go to G-Fest, and this was my first time really visiting G-fans in person. And it was a much better experience than experience G-fans online. Because online, they're going to be very quick to judge you without seeing your face. Whereas in person, you don't have way too many ruthless people just willing to right off the bat insult you. I mean, yeah, they do exist, and I have experienced them at G-Fest sometimes. They're far and few between, but you get what I'm saying. So I experienced the dealer's room, I experienced the artist rooms, and I experienced the costume contest. And this is all just hitting me like wildfire. I'm like, how do I get involved? And then we see Godzilla Final Wars on the big screen at the Pickwick. You remember our little panel we had there?
I do.
And I can't remember. You were at that premiere? Or
I was not.
Not the premiere, at the showing.
I was at that showing. Yes, I was.
Oh man, history repeated itself, because then that Pickwick Theater was damn near sold out. I think it actually was sold out. And then the years later, the premiere we go to, same thing happens. I almost didn't make it in because I didn't pre-order my tickets. I waited in line the old way. And then there were a bunch of people who got turned away shortly after me. I felt terrible. But I was thankful we all got in. Mm-hmm. But you could see how it was. It was really no different of an experience than it was all the years before. It was pretty much the same reaction. But yeah, people always want to trash Final Wars. They all love to hate on Final Wars. But you and I can both attest that whenever they want to trash it, all we have to do is show that long line going out the Pickwick and that huge theater. And we can all say, you were saying? The numbers don't lie. So, yeah, after that first year, I started getting that itch to make my first suit there.
I know I've read that there were some fan projects that kind of influenced you a little bit. Now, before we get into that, so constructing that Godzilla costume, it took a lot of work from what I could tell. It took a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort to make it. So what went into constructing the suit itself?
Well, there are a bunch of videos on my YouTube where I kind of showed what I was doing with my Godzilla costume. But I started out, you have to understand, there's a lot of other Godzilla suits. I just want to say this first. There's a lot of other Godzilla suits now that dance circles around my suit because they've all pretty much learned the right ways on how to do it. My suit, as much as I love it, I will say it's a trial and error suit. It was a lot of trial and error. I started material-wise with carpet foam because I read an article by this one guy who tried it this way, and it worked for him, but I realized the carpet foam didn't respond well to paint. So then I had to build over that mistake. I used foam, like everybody's using now. But then I spray painted over the foam. Big mistake. Because it kind of looked okay, but I'm like, no. Because I wasn't even really... I should have done my research a little bit better in the beginning. I should have been reading up, you use latex, and then you mix the color paint, and then you do this, and then you do that. I was kind of in a race. But eventually I did get there. After the spray painted foam trick didn't work, I built on top of it again by gluing cotton sheeting over my mistake because, and a lot of people don't do it this way, and I understand why, because you lose detail doing this. But the benefit of using cotton sheeting as opposed to not using carpet sheeting is that the cotton sheeting holds the latex much stronger, and it makes your suit more durable. Whereas if you're going more for detail and presentation, I mean, sure, it'll still look awesome without cotton sheeting, but you run the risk of it ripping sooner. Although if you keep on applying coat after coat after coat after coat, you might be okay. So, yeah, a lot of trial and error with this suit, and I'll admit, it's not the best looking suit. A lot of people, and this always hurts me to this day, everybody thinks my suit is literally Son of Godzilla. No, That was the very last design I had in mind making this. This was more a mesh of Godzilla 74 and Final Wars and a little bit of 2000 to me. But I guess everybody who loves to hate on my suit all thinks it looks like Son of Godzilla. I don't see it. I don't see how they see it. And a lot of people like to make fun of the little tracheotomy neck thing there because I made holes so I could see. I probably should have made it a little more subtle, but again, I was anxious. I wanted to make the deadline for G-Fest, and yeah, I got overzealous. I probably should have been more patient.
But even with pushing it forward and maybe not doing as good as you could, you definitely have still created something that I would say has a level of iconicness to it. Because it was not just used for G-Fest that year, and it was not just used for Godzilla Battle Royale. It's appeared in plenty. It's shown up at plenty of other places. It's appeared in other works. What can you say about those?
Well, as far as those are concerned, I actually do want to open up that I was actually called by 30 Rock, the show, because they saw my video on YouTube, and one of their guys on their crew asked if I'd be willing to drive out to New York to be in an episode. And I'm like, yes. So I'm getting everything ready, but then they call back and they're like, so, since you're not union, we need somebody else to get in the suit. Is that okay? And I'm like, I didn't really want to say no, but I was like, the suit's kind of molded to me. So, I mean, we can see what we can do there, but I was still willing to kind of go with it. And keep in mind, they also asked the guy who was Kiru in my film, GBR, Jeff Magnuson, and they called him out because he was from New York, but they also wanted me too. So I'm a few days away, I'm ready to go, and then they call me up and they say, oh, we actually found somebody in New York who has a suit. We don't need you anymore. And I was crushed. And when I met Jeff Magnuson later, he was like, dude, they should have called you. They should have stuck with you. But ironically, I heard they let Jeff Magnuson be in his suit. They didn't ask him if somebody else could be in it, even though he wasn't union. So they were kind of changing their story as they went. But I really felt bad. I would have been willing to do whatever they wanted, but yeah, I felt bad. But I was happy for Jeff Magnuson that he got to be on there. And I was very honored to work with him having been on that show. But as far as the other works, I obviously helped Dojo Studios out. I first helped them in 2010 with their G-Fantas Worlds Collide. And at first, they actually wanted me to put horns on my Godzilla head because they were afraid of Toho saying something. And I was very reluctant to do that, but I was like, okay. But then I guess for whatever reason, Paul said, oh, no, you don't need to do it. I think we'll be fine. So I was like, good, because that would look stupid. But yeah. And also, aside from Dojo, I helped. Are you familiar with Jared Faust?
Yes.
I helped his Lobster Dance Studios crew in Georgia with their project, Ultraman Sorta versus Godzilla. Have you seen it?
I have, yes, with Matt Frank. He's in that.
Yes. And I will admit, Jared and I, and I'm not saying anything bad about him, he's one of the most talented film guys I've ever worked with. I mean, personality-wise, we sometimes clashed, and I regret that. I still wish him, to this day, the very best. And I was willing to help him finish up the project regardless of our differences. But for what it's worth, I still respect him today. I still think he's a great stand-up guy and an exceptional artist as far as film goes. I mean, you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
But it was an honor to work with them. Could I have been a little more professional and cooperative with what they were wanting? Yes, I do admit that, because there were times, for instance, there was, they wanted to do a squib effect on my suit. Now, at first I was willing to do it, but then when I saw a test, I was scared. And then I remembered all the horror stories about Haruo Nakajima getting burned and all that. And I was also very stressed at the time of finishing my film. We had weather issues going on, and I had to stay longer than I anticipated. And I was getting, the truth was, it got to the point where I got impatient and I sort of acted prima donna-ish, and I regret that. I'm coming clean about it. And Jared, just so you know, I still thank you and respect you for letting me be a part of it. So if I ever made you guys feel bad about whatever happened there, I'm sorry. So yeah, but it was great working with them.
Thank you for that. That's a very nice story. That's very nice.
So sorry, to finish the squib story, I was on edge, and I still did it. I was like, okay, let's do it, and I was just waiting for the moment, and they had constructed a building that was pre-cut to break apart when I hit it. It was still pretty hard, but I had to hit it hard for it to break, because I still had to make the effect look like it wasn't broken. And I'm waiting for the call to action, and I'm scared to death this thing is going to burn right through my suit at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So I bust through it, and I'm hitting it, because I do martial arts too. I hit it harder than I would a cinder block. And I wailed on it, just like they told me to do, but one problem. My head fell off. Like, it fell forward. I swung so hard that the momentum of the head fell forward, because it's only being held by Velcro. And it fell forward, but they were shooting at a way upward angle where they didn't quite notice it, and the smoke kind of blocked it. So thank God for that. I wasn't aware of this, but the whole time I just realized the head fell off. Luckily, I didn't get burned, but I'm more mad at myself and my suit that the head fell off, and it took them all this time to set that up, and I thought I ruined the shot. I was swearing in the suit when after they yelled cut, and I just took one more swing, and I broke what was left of it, and I was like, oh man, I made an ass out of myself, didn't I?
That does bring up something that I can kind of relate to, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on. So I recently did a short film, not Godzilla based, but it was a giant monster short film, and I did some man in suit techniques. I had a suit made for me. It has a lot of problems. Danny DiManna, who constructed the suit for me, he and I he had to ship it to me, and during filming I had to video call him, and I was like, Danny, I'm stuck in the suit and this has happened. What do I do? How do I fix this? But it was a lot of fun. And it was a lot of fun, but it was awful. We shot mid-May, 90-degree weather in a unair-conditioned garage in the middle of the day. So, and it was a giant black creature. So, the heat of the black likes to hold in heat. So it was a sweatsuit. That's what it was. So
get used to it, because it's gonna get hot in those things.
So what was your experiences wearing the suit with sweating and the heat and the weight? How did all of that, how did you work with that? What techniques did you use and whatnot? Well,
it was just like you described. Yeah, the suit was obviously very hot. It's a lot of latex and foam and carpet foam on top of foam pressing down on me. And you just reminded me, in Georgia there, man, it was hot on that shoot, and I was very irritable. One of the reasons I was irritable. And suits and heat do not mix, especially if you have studio lamps, like poor Haruo Nakajima did in a 237-pound suit. That suit, is nowhere near that. That's probably only 70 pounds at most. So hats off to Nakajima, Satsuma, and Kitagawa, and everybody else who wears a heavy suit under studio lamps and in the water. So, yeah, it's something where you get into it and you just start learning how to deal with it. Not everybody handles heat and stress and the confines, if you're claustrophobic, all the same way. But it's your will to really relive that magic the guys who inspired us do, to really stick with it, spend 10 more minutes when you're screaming, I'm done. Because that, like Rocky said in that famous quote of his in part 6, that's how winning's done.
Yeah, that everything you just said just put me back into that shoot, because that's, I mean, I remember sitting there. This creature was more of a quadruped, so I was knuckle walking.
Oh,
knuckle walking sucks, by the way.
Did you have boxing gloves?
No, there were some foam inserts into the hands that my hands would go into. And then that's how I would walk. With those
you could probably use MMA gloves to kind of cushion, but yeah.
And I remember because we also had fog and whatnot, so I couldn't have a fan because we had fog rolling, and fog machines produce heat as well. It was a whole thing, and I remember standing on our platform, and I remember just standing there, like I'm literally like I can see a little bit that the tiny window I had that's probably like no larger than like a $50 coin. And I remember like just staring down at the ground, and I could see and feel like the sweat like coming and then dripping through that hole.
Has anybody suggested that you wear the do-rag?
I had something on my hair. Okay. I wore like skin tight everything to help, but
headbands can be very useful in that situation.
But yeah, no, it's exhausting. I remember the problem was I only had one stagehand. So it took him and I to get me into the suit. And then it was still problematic to get into the suit. And because of how problematic it was, and the fear of like, if I take this on and off, I'm going to break it. Once I was in the suit, I couldn't leave until we had shot everything. So I think we did the time frame. It took me an hour and a half to do everything. And
oh man,
it probably I had some it was over a 2-day shoot. The second day I was in the suit for an hour and a half, and I remember saying, you need to have a phone ready to call 911 if I pass out, it's a heat stroke. We need to get somebody here immediately.
You may you need to be careful, because heat stroke is not something to joke around with in those suits, and you need people there in case something does happen. Yeah.
So just hearing kind of what you described kind of brought me back to that, because it's an art in of itself to just endure that, right? And it takes a lot to do that. Now, you mentioned you've done some martial arts in your day. Did your background and stuff like that help you at all in either your portrayal as Godzilla or how you wore the suit?
A little bit, because I am a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. I have some Kung Fu, Shaolin experience. I've dabbled around with some Wing Chun, and I have some pro wrestling under my belt. I used to train in pro wrestling with POW Entertainment here.
Oh, wow.
So, but a lot of them teach you about balance and stances and how to set foundations. And that really comes into play with acting in a kaiju suit. You really have to learn how to hold your balance and how to counterbalance things, because when you're adding more pounds to your body with a suit, it becomes a whole different ballgame. You have to relearn how to walk. You have to relearn how to punch, how to kick, how to do whatever you're going to do. And sometimes if you fall over, you're not able to get up as you normally would. You need help, maybe. But balance, and even a ballet artist could use skills as a kaiju, because, again, you have to know how to hold your foundation. And you have to be disciplined with how long you can hold that foundation and when it's time to get out. And you have to communicate this, because people are just going to assume you're fine if you don't say anything.
Now, with all of that, you talked about, we've been talking about you acting in the suit and whatnot. Now, at what point did it come to your head, I have a Godzilla suit, I should do a Godzilla movie? When did that thought finally come in?
It was kind of there when I finally finished the suit. I was really wanting to show it at G-Fest and hopefully get that first place win at, it was G-Fest 2009. And unfortunately, I did not. I won third place. I was a little saddened by that, but then I was like, well, what else can I do with it? And Paul Gibbens, who I mentioned before, who runs Dojo Studios today, he was asking for my help and a bunch of other kaiju cosplayers at G-Fest to band together to make this Dojo Studios commercial, which it was very much in the style of the old Toho films, but also paying homage to the Shogun Warriors figures of the 70s. I don't know if I said that right. I think the Shogun, or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
So we do that, and I took my camera, and we all kind of banded our cameras together and all shot different things, different actions, and they had a script for the commercial, and we got G-Fest attendees involved doing a crowd scene, and we had the kaiju police guys who kind of ran security there for the celebs who are visiting. They got involved. And as I was doing all this, I started getting ideas. And I was kind of suggesting things to Paul. And he was encouraging that I try my hand at it on my own. But as far as the G-Fest thing was concerned, they only wanted a commercial. So I asked Paul, is it okay if I take all the footage and try to edit like just a battle sequence? And he was nice enough to allow me to do that. And I got footage from Tristan Domey. I got footage from Nick Cloutier, who were also helping at the time. And I meshed it all together, and I took Toho songs and I kind of molded that into it. This was when I was really playing around with editing. I really had no prior experience. I was just learning as I went. So one thing led to the other. I got inspired. I was having fun. It was kind of felt like I was making a music video, more like, but it was still fun. And then when I finished it, I showed it to Paul. I showed it to JD Lees, and they were like, "Ooh, oh, this looks pretty cool." And then I kind of suggested, what if we showed this before one of the films at G-Fest? That would be really cool. So, and that's actually what they did. They showed it right before, I think it was Ultraman the Next. They showed it before. And I believe one of the celebrities, it might have been Shinji Higuchi or somebody, was there, and they all saw it, and they were like, "Whoa, this is pretty cool." And yeah, the Pickwick audience loved it the following year, and that's when I started to get the itch. Oh boy, I smell a fan film idea. But also, you had asked me before about other fan films. One of the very first fan films I was ever inspired by was Batman Dead End. Have you ever seen it?
I've not.
It's a fan film about Batman accidentally running into the middle of a battle between an alien and a predator. And it was done by Sandy Cholera was his name. He worked under Stan Winston's studio shop, and he was allowed access to some props, I believe. And they went with the comic version of Batman. And trust me, go on YouTube and watch this after this, because this is kind of what inspired many fan filmmakers, including me. But there were also other fan film artists out there who I was like, man, I wish I could do that too. There was Freddy versus the Ghostbusters by Braxton Films way back in the early 2000s. I believe that's still up on YouTube somewhere. But then there was also Chris Hunty Elchison, who made Godzilla X the Kaiju Killer, if you ever saw that one. I was very inspired by, because he made his own suit way before I did. And his suit actually inspired mine in some ways. So, yeah, I was getting that itch to, well, if they could do it, I can do it. And that's kind of where it was born.
So let me ask you this. Was there a pre-production process, like writing a script or planning like what the story beats would be or anything like that? Did you have a time frame for that kind of stuff?
A time frame, no, but I was kind of doing things as I went. As far as a script, yes, I at first came up with a very short idea with about half the monsters, and there were a lot of differences to it. And then I met Josh Oshkosh Bagosh, a friend of Jared Faust's, and I asked him if he could have a go at the script, which he did. And I did love most of his script, although there were some elements of mine that I still wanted to keep. And from my understanding and memories, we came down to a loose agreement to where we could have it both ways on this and that. I'm sure, truth be told, me and Josh, I respect him, but we had a bit of a falling out, and it wasn't a pleasant one. I wish him well, but I just realized he was one of those guys where, as much as you try to be friends with some people just don't mesh well. And that's no disrespect to him. But I tried to work things out with him to where he was happy and I was happy. And at the time I thought he was, but later I think he made it known that what I did in the final thing wasn't to his liking. And I was not trying to hurt his feelings or anything, but I hope he can understand that at the end of the day, it was still my project I was trying to run. But for the record, I did try to keep as much of his written dialogue in the lines as I could. So as a director, you have to understand, you're both trying to finish your project and you're trying to please everybody. Right. It's not an easy job. And truth be told, I think you can agree with this in the filmmaking process. Don't expect everybody who starts with you to still be your friend at the end.
It's definitely difficult because there are those moments in production where, as an example, I recently was on a shoot, and I was the director. I had wrote it, and I was the one starring in this project. It was an informative introduction for a company, and I wrote it. It was my dialogue. I was willing to, mix it up a little bit if I had to, but I kept messing up, and as the actor, that's already frustrating not being able to do your job. But then as the writer and director, I got really infuriated. And my cameraman, he was like, "It's fine. Just don't worry about it." I was like, "No, I'm being an idiot. This is stupid." I was really tearing myself down because how frustrating it was that, we couldn't get this done. And so I can really, understand that process because it is a very difficult task when you want it to be perfect.
Yeah, and you're banding together with these amazing, talented people that you all want to have you all want the same thing at the end of the day, but sometimes your vision and their vision don't always coincide the same way. Now, you also have to understand, Josh had written the script with only a certain set of monsters, but then the next G-Fest came, and then more kaiju cosplayers came in who actually wanted to be in my film, like Nick Huber. He had that Zegra suit, and then I saw there was a Orga suit, and I asked Rich St. Andrews, who he and his son had made that suit, if we could use that one. And then, we kept adding more and more. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why Josh got frustrated, because and there were probably other reasons that I don't know about, but it made it hard on him when I kept adding more and more. So I can understand that if that was the case, but I was blindly going with full excitement, everything in the kitchen sink here.
Now, out of curiosity, was there anything in any draft of the script that had to get cut due to production issues or budgetary constraints or anything like that?
I mean, there were some lines that I cut for continuity pacing-wise, and I had one idea. I didn't quite put it on paper, but I was really wanting to. I wanted to have Gorosaurus and Rodan in the film. And I had a very funny idea when Godzilla's down and Kiru's just starting to get unhacked by the heroes. I wanted there to be a moment where there's kind of a hot tag team moment where out of nowhere Rodan comes carrying Gorosaurus all the way from Monster Island, and he drops Gorosaurus in the thick of battle to fend the monsters off Godzilla for a minute. And while Rodan kind of does his air thing and starts knocking monsters off balance, I really would have wanted that. But there were no cosplayers available who had any suits of that. I didn't have any props I could work with. So, and we were stretching it pretty far at that point. So that's one idea I really wanted to do. I can't think of any others at the moment. If they come up, I'll let you know.
Now, the film very much has its influences, and it wears those influences quite well at some points. What were some of your fondest influences for when you developed the story and, some of the story elements in the film?
Well, I think it's quite obvious Final Wars plays a lot into it, because I was always such a huge fan of Final Wars, and I feel like my love for it was kind of a form of defiance against the common hatred that seemed to be pushed at it. Now, was I trying to make this film a copy of Final Wars? No, I was trying to elaborate on Final Wars' idea a little more, because it gave us more monsters, but they didn't put all the monsters in one place. And you also have to understand, I'm a fan of pro wrestling. I love WWF, not calling it WWE. But I especially love the Royal Rumbles, if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. Where you got all the wrestlers coming in one ring, all at one place, one time. Also, Godzilla and his friends and enemies in America, not Japan like they always are. So I'm trying to really shake things up here, different. And also with the format of this film, I think you can agree, most Godzilla films, what is it? 30-40% monster action and 60-70% human story.
Yeah, if not even like a greater difference, like 80-90% humans, 10-20% monsters.
But my whole idea of Godzilla Battle Royale was to flip that ratio, to see what would happen. How would it look? I was hoping it would look great, because I always wanted to see more monster action. And there's a lot of kaiju fans who want that. And that's not a bad thing to want. Now, when you do that, admittedly, you're cutting out human elements that really make the story memorable. I will agree there. And it took me doing that to kind of learn that a little bit, but I still do not regret my decision in trying it, because I still feel it was a unique decision to make. The King Kong versus Godzilla is kind of an influence too, because I always wanted to see Godzilla and King Kong go at it, but I knew that, how do I make King Kong a bad guy though, with Godzilla being a good guy? And I knew I could not recapture that original magic of King Kong and Godzilla. Not in that fashion. But then I'm thinking, what's the next best thing? What if Kong was a zombie? And I'm like, okay, a rabid Kong, now that I could see. And I thought, I think that's something fans might find intriguing. A lot of fans may not like that, because a lot of fans are true King Kong fans, and I respect that. I couldn't just have King Kong as a bad guy. That wouldn't have been cool. So how do you make it to where a majority of the fans will accept it? Zombie Kong. But I still wanted to recapture some of that old school battle aspect that King Kong versus Godzilla had, where it's kind of fun, but it's exciting, but it's violent. And I wanted to load up the violence a little bit more. And this was way before we got Godzilla versus Kong.
Briefly talking about Godzilla versus Kong. I was going to bring this up later, but since you mentioned it, now's a perfect time. Now, your film, oddly enough, does have some similar ideas that the Wingard duology has also done. Some of the fights, I specifically am thinking when Godzilla and Zombie Kong push each other back and they fall into buildings. You know, that was done in the Hong Kong fight for Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah.
And then the whole Godzilla evolving to have a purple, brighter colored beam to, you know, fight off the villains, all showed up in your fan film 10 years ago. And now, 10 years later, those two ideas, those two concepts have been done in official films.
Well, yeah, I've had some people talk to me about this, and the thought, yeah, it's tempting to think, oh, did Adam Wingard and what's his name from King of the Monsters watch my film and take notes? Because there are some moments where some fans have asked me, do you think they took this moment as inspiration from your film? Because there's a moment in King of the Monsters when Godzilla's down and Mothra Carl's on top of him, that I've had some fans come up to me and like, that's like when Mothra powers up Godzilla when he's down. And I'm like, a little bit, not quite. But then when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, I saw some more subtle moments. There, in particular, when Kong went for the jawbreaker and then he did the pulse. I'm like, well, that was obvious. And then when Kong tried to leap at him from a skyscraper with whatever he was holding in his hand, like a bar or something, that was kind of from my film when he leaps off the John Hancock building onto me. And then there was, Kong drop kicking Godzilla. I was like, okay, I mean, sure, that those moments are givens for ideas for a fight between them. So I can't take credit that, oh, Adam Wingard watched my film and copied off me. No. Does a part of me wish he was taking notes on my film? Sure, but I'm sure he's never seen my film. I'm small potatoes to him.
Well, you never know. One of the most important things I think to note about Godzilla Battle Royale is currently you're sitting at 2.6 million views. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the only YouTuber who has millions of views. And you have to also understand, I don't have 100,000 subscribers. I never got one of those YouTube awards where you get a silver plaque every time you get 100,000 subscribers. So Unfortunately, yeah, I wish I had that, but I am happy for the millions of views I've gotten.
Let's talk about the production of the film a little bit more. You know, we've talked about some of the influences. There are, you know, I think I noticed when watching it this most recent time, there were influences from like GMK and
Yes.
Destroy All Monsters and whatnot. Oddly, one of the things I thought was very interesting was your setting of the film. It takes place in modern day 2014 Chicago, and it's in the same timeline as the Showa era, which I thought was a very interesting idea, you know, to directly link it to the older films.
Yes, that was the idea from the beginning. And as a kid, whenever I was in downtown Chicago, I always envisioned Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Mechagodzilla, and all his friends and enemies in the downtown loop area, just destroying things. And the thought of that was, as a kid, you're dreaming about that. I'm like, oh man, how do I make that happen?
So I guess you can almost say that this film had been sitting in your head for a couple decades by this point.
Kind of vividly, but yes.
Talking about, you know, as because this had been your first time talking about a couple decades prior to Godzilla Battle Royale, you did not have a ton of film experience, correct?
Not really. I did have acting experience through college in Elmhurst College. I had a theater degree. I unfortunately didn't do much with it afterward. Was I the best actor? Maybe not. I tried. I like to think I gave it all I could. And acting is not an easy job this day and age. Think of how many talent agencies you constantly have to audition for and make sure that talent agency is legit, you know, and make sure you're not getting scammed. It's not an easy profession these days. Everybody wants to be an actor. And so very few make it, and so very few even have a natural aptitude at it.
What does somebody who is not well versed in that and somebody who has that theater background, what was that perspective going into this film as the writer, director, editor, technical, I think, producer? I don't know if you credited yourself as that, but you did fall under that. What is that like? Well,
I mean, one of the true reasons I really wanted to do this was because I was at a time in my life where I was very depressed. I was lacking purpose, and I felt I needed something to propel me. And this was really the only thing calling me to do that. And if that's not a good reason to go forward with it, I really don't know what is for anybody, because you have to go with your gut, and you have to really do this because you want it. Now, granted, yes, I wanted to do something and be a big part of G-Fest in a very vital way. I wanted to put my mark on G-Fandom. Was I seeking validation through this? Guilty, as charged. But I was trying to do it for the right reasons too, and for me. Because you have to understand, this day and age, people who do things for validation unfortunately aren't looked the highest upon. And you're going to get a lot of flack if people think you're doing it for attention. But that's really no one's place to judge if you are feeling it from here. Whether for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. You have to do it for your reasons and nobody else's reasons.
Yeah, I think that's important because, you know, one of my favorite things I always think about is you can't have art. You can't have a heart without art.
Yeah.
Because when you spell heart, H-E-A-R-T, there's art in heart at all times.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think a lot of people, maybe not, but art is something that it has to come from inside. It has to speak to the artist, or else it doesn't necessarily blend the best, if you will.
Yes.
That's something that as I've continued to venture into film and my creative endeavors, I've in recent time just realized I need to experience more so that I can build upon more, so that I can say, yeah, I've been in this situation. What if this happened? What if from here, the creative flow just kind of goes out from there, because all creativity does come from some base experience. For you saw Invasion of Astro Monster and then King Kong versus Godzilla. You saw Godzilla X the Kaiju Killer and all this, and that led you to creating a suit, which then led to you saying, okay, I have a suit. Let's make a fan film. Okay, what suits do we have? And then the creative, that's the creative process. That is everything that is a requirement there. And I think using art as well as a way to maybe even not specifically push away or ignore, when you're going through hardships, but using it as a way to turn that frown upside down, to find joy, to find some sort of happiness. I've had to do that in the past, where I'm in a dark moment and I say, I want to make a short film. Let's do it. Let's make something. And then I let that process, that production, take over those negative thoughts, and I let it replace it with positive, energetic, important things that kind of get those negative thoughts out. And I think that's very, I think every artist, they owe it to themselves to be upfront about that.
You have to do it because you want it. If you don't want it, why are you doing it?
If we're talking about some of the things that you wanted, one of the things that I think this film stands out with including is its roster of monsters. Now, where did your roster come from? You mentioned Orga, you've mentioned Zegra, Godzilla, of course, you already had. Kong, you've talked about. But where did the rest of them come from?
Well, aside from Godzilla, I also made the Hydra suit. I also made the Zombie Kong suit. Okay, I cheated. I bought a ape suit from Spirit Halloween. I doctored it up a little bit and made it more zombie-like. And I also made the Ebra suit. And the Hydra suit I made mostly like this one, foam and latex. The Ebra suit I made from steel frames, paper mache, and latex over that, along with Right Stuff expanding foam to give it a crustacean look. That technique I actually give credit to Paul Gibbens for teaching me when he made his stuff. Mothra was a prop made by Paul Gibbens. Like I said, Orga was made by Rich St. Andrews and his son Sebastian. Gigan and Anguirus were made by Chris Bioa, if you're familiar with him. He made that amazing fusion Godzilla later on. Now, Jacob Baker, he made the second Godzilla, Hyper Godzilla, Varan, and Magma. Magma from Gorath. And I can't thank him enough for all his contributions there. Everybody loves his suits, probably the most in my film. And then who else do we have? Nick Huber made Zegra, and he actually asked to be in my film, which I was like, Gamera monster in my film. Hell yeah, let's do it. I know I'm missing people. It'll come back to me. Chris Hunty Elchison was very gracious to lend me his Biollante prop he used in Godzilla X the Kaiju Killer. And he also made a little prop of my suit when Biollante flings him away. And he also helped me make Queen Ghidorah, the puppet. And that was a very interesting idea in itself. But Rayanne, the Marvel monster, but it was actually called Shirakuna in another Dojo Studios project we were doing, which again, they were gracious enough to let me use that footage too and interweave it in Godzilla Battle Royale. So yeah, we got Ghidorah was made by Brant Morin, I remember, and then Chris Hunty-Elchison actually also made a little puppet version of that too.
Now, speaking of puppets, you also do have quite a few puppets in the film as well.
I tried my best to go as practical effect as I could. I'm not the biggest fan of CG. Would I have used it more? Yes, but sparingly. I probably would have loved to have had a CG sequence with Queen Ixatius morphing into Queen Ghidorah. I would have used it there. And there probably would have been other moments I would have used it, but I would have tried to limit it. Now, green screening and practical use, yes. That is technically, I like to call it practical, but some people still call it CG. It's kind of both, if you think of it. It depends on everybody's certain definition of it. But the idea was to go as practical as possible. For
your puppets, you had quite a few. You mentioned Ghidorah had one. You have the Manda, which I believe that's a hand puppet.
Oh, Manda, sorry. Thanks for reminding me. That's Chris Biola's. It was actually from a Ghidorah suit he made, but we thought we could still use it as Manda, because the Manda head and the Showa Ghidorah head look very similar.
Right. And then you also have Mothra.
Yes, Mothra. Paul Gavins's Mothra. We molded it to look more GMK-ish. Even though we're dealing with the Showa Mothra, we figured we could cheat and go a little GMK here.
And then you even have the slugs, I believe is what they're called in the credits.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry. My mind's a little...
It's okay. It was 10 years ago.
I think it's fairly obvious I'm a Resident Evil fan. Are you familiar with it?
I don't play video games, so I apologize for my...
No, that's fine. It's not for everybody. But the slugs are an inspiration from the lickers creatures of Resident Evil that climb on the wall, and they have those brains for heads. But yes, they're not quite lickers, but I wanted to throw in some Resident Evil influence. But I asked Jacob Baker, since he had a licker suit he made, what if we painted that suit green and had him serve as Hedra slugs? And he didn't even think about it. He was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And he did it. He repainted the whole thing green, and we filmed it on the blue screen. And I just kept filming him do all these different actions, quadruped and all that. And I had multiple licker slugs. I still call them lickers. But yeah, I wanted to throw in some Resident Evil love in there.
Who all were in the suits and who all were puppeteering?
Well, the makers of the suits who I listed before were in their respective suits for the most part. Sometimes Rich St. Andrews stepped in Hedra when I needed to be in something else. Sometimes I was in Hedra. Sometimes I was in Zombie Kong when I was fighting Jacob as Hyper Godzilla. But I was in Godzilla, and then Scrooge Ian Jones was in Zombie Kong, and also my friend Scott Whipple, when I was doing things at home, would double as Zombie Kong. He actually lifted me up in my own suit. That Scott Whipple is one strong dude. So it was appropriate he should be Zombie Kong. But the puppeteering, we usually needed multiple people, and that was usually me, Riley McGee, his father, Joe Flores, and several other people. If I'm not naming them, I'm sorry. But yeah, and we had to kind of play around with it to understand how the motions went. And then when we finally kind of figured it out, we started playing around with the film. And I was really hoping things would coincide, which thankfully they did, believably enough, although critics are going to agree to disagree.
And then, so was there any special effects moment? Because obviously, special effects are difficult. That's why they're special.
Oh, yeah.
So,
they're no joke.
Do you recall any moments in production where you were like, I have no idea how we're supposed to do this, or like any specific effect that was like, I'm baffled we got to this point and got it done?
One, I think, that comes to mind is when I had to shoot the part where Zombie Kong actually slightly breaks Godzilla's jaw open, and I wanted to have there be a blood effect. And there kind of was a little bit of a practical effect. I had Scott Whipple in the Zombie Kong suit holding it open, and then I was underneath the head with a tube trying to spray out fake blood from Spirit Halloween. It kind of worked, not the way I'd hoped, but then I also added some stock footage blood to give it a little more oomph. So, yeah, I didn't think I could pull it off, but we did just enough. And I'm like, and like you said, I kind of amazed myself there in that you'd be surprised what is possible.
So one of the things that I think is really fun is when you get all of the suits, that famous Antarctica set photo with all of the Godzilla Final Wars costumes.
Yeah.
All there in that photo shoot. Now, at any one point, what was the highest amount of costumes you had on set?
Well, on set, it was usually at G-Fest. We had probably anywhere from 8 to 10 suits that we were, not all at one time, but on the set. The most during a filming shot, practically, was probably with Zombie Kong, Hydra, and who else was... maybe Ebro was on there. One or two others, but maybe 4 all at one point. But actually, in one shot, digitally, I had about 14 monsters when they're all doing that Royal Rumble shot. And that was a nightmare of a post-FX shot to do.
I can imagine. I'm sure there was a ton of layers for that.
Oh, trying to render that thing took forever just to preview it. And it was taking up so much memory on my computer. At one point, I think the file actually got corrupted and I had to do it all over again. I went into depression mode because I worked so hard on the first one and I was loving it. And then this is part of the challenge of any filmmaker. So any aspiring filmmakers listening, be ready for that because that's part of the job.
Yeah, it is. It 100% is being, in a way, you almost have to expect disappointment because that's going to be the easiest way out of not being upset when something doesn't go according to plan. Now, one of the things that also can be problematic is sets. Now, there are a lot of digital sets, but there are practical sets. Now, was that all shot at G-Fest?
Most of the practical shots were all shot at G-Fest, and that is the lovely work of Paul Gavins and Rich St. Andrews, who was our MacGyver, because he could just invent things on the fly and make it work somehow. And if there was a problem, he was Mr. Fix-It-With-It in minutes. And he always enjoyed what he was doing. He put so much time and pride into it. But we also had the sets wonderfully done from the Lobster Dance crew in Georgia for the day shots that you saw in brief moments, but were mostly in Ultraman Sorta versus Godzilla. They gave me permission with my own camera footage to film some of that stuff, which I was very thankful for. And they were very nice to allow me to do that. But you have to understand, they had a raised set with those buildings, and they actually got those buildings from some other set. I can't remember where, but they told me where they got them from, and I just forgot. But these were quality buildings, and I had to wait a long time in that suit sometimes for them to set everything properly. And at first, I was very impatient, but them doing it kind of taught me what really goes into taking your time to make it right. Aspiring kaiju costumers who want to be in film, take my word for it. When you got crews around you moving things around and you're sweating to death in that suit, trust me when I say don't complain, because those people working tirelessly as you are in the suit. They are also tirelessly working to make the shot around you look good. And when you complain about that, it's not cool. And the other way around too, but you have to trust in what the people around you who are trying to make you look good are doing.
There is definitely a lot of the trust the process. You got to trust the process and make that work.
And admittedly, I didn't fully embrace that until the very end of my film, and I wish I had embraced it earlier.
Was it entirely shot in Chicago?
Mostly in Chicago. I filmed a bit in Georgia. I filmed Jacob Baker's suit scenes, his green and blue screens there in his home in St. Joe, Arkansas. I traveled to Sydney, New York for Jeff Magnuson's green screen scenes with MechaGodzilla. And I filmed some beach shots in Florida to pose as Lake Michigan. I went to Chicago downtown for the backdrop shots for the green screen. And I actually got on top of 15-level parking garage buildings and just filmed some pan shots to hopefully fit what I was trying to get for the green screen of the monsters, and to film them from the right level to hopefully get that desired effect.
How long did it take you to film everything?
About 4 years.
4 years?
Took me a year to make this suit, and then another year to make the Hydra and the Zombie Kong and the Ebra suit. And then that right after that was when I got the itch to make the film. So then another 4 years there.
Do you know what the budget probably was?
If I had to guesstimate, I mean, this suit alone probably cost me about roughly $1,000, give or take, materials. Mm-hmm. And the other suits in the hundreds somewhere. All the traveling and gas money I did up there in the hundreds. The camera I spent money on, that was about a $1,500 camera at the time.
What camera did you use?
A Canon Vivixia HFS 21 something. It was a Sam's Club Canon model. Okay. Not really ideal for filming, but it was all I had. And all the computer equipment, that was ranging in a few hundred, maybe thousand. So maybe in the teens of thousands altogether over the course of a 6-year period. If I had to guesstimate, it was maybe 12, maybe 15,000.
That's the joy of filmmaking, right? The price tag.
and bear in mind, I never crowdfunded any of it. It was all on my own dollar. And I also feel bad that I didn't really exactly pay my actors, but I did provide food and gas money when I could for them.
I usually, on my short films, I mean, we only shoot over the course of like 2-3 days, but I usually am like, we're going to go all out to dinner. We're going to have a nice dinner, and I'm paying for it. Yeah. And that alone is usually like a hefty bill.
Yeah, I tried to satisfy everyone's needs as best I could. I did explain to them, I'm sorry I can't pay you, but this is so much fun. It's a good experience, and I'll spot you gas money and food where I can.
Now, I want to talk about the cast, but before we do, the miniature sets is also very unique for a fan film, because a lot of people can't afford to create miniature sets, and you do have quite a few shots in miniature sets in a miniature city. What was that like? What was that setup process like, and how did you get access to that? That was all at G-Fest, I would assume.
It was mostly at G-Fest, some of it at Georgia. And in my garage, I actually did, okay, laugh it up. I built some cardboard buildings, and I got some of those at the time when you could go to Dollar Tree and get those foam core boards and then X-Acto knife some windows out. I tried that. Was it the most believable? No. But it was all I had to work with my knowledge at the time.
Right.
And I was... it was trying to figure out continuity is probably the biggest challenge when you're dealing with a set, because sometimes you do an action and then you film another action. Oh, I want to keep it. But then you realize in post, oh, damn, this building's out of place here and that's there. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get all YouTube flamed for this and that. Because trust me when I say you tell yourself, oh, they're not going to notice. They will notice.
Now, speaking of talking about your cast, because you have, I would say about maybe a dozen people in this film, a dozen actors. So how did you find all of your actors? And I know there's two in particular that are a little bigger than the other names, and I want to talk about them, but I'm going to ask a question about them after our main cast.
Several of them were people I knew. Sarah Breidenbach, she and I went to college together, and I wanted her as Commander Amanda Lexington, which I knew she would nail out of the park. She also provided the voice of the Mothra Fairies and sang the songs, because she is an opera singer and well-versed. Jonathan Goldwyn was another friend of mine who played Sargyle, and he was ecstatic at the prospect. And man, he made that role his own. He had so much fun with that role. He had me laughing as I was filming him. The guy had charisma and a half. But yeah, I love Jonathan to death, and I still thank him to this day. I thank Sarah. I thank all of them. And then we had Vika Zyka as the alien Queen Exatius. I kind of ran an ad in, I think it was Craigslist or somewhere, that I needed actors, and she responded to the call. And she made a very terrifying Queen Exatius, in my opinion. There's shots that still freak me out, honestly. Especially right before she changes into Queen Ghidorah, when I gave her that red glow on her eyes, and you're hearing all those sound effects. I'm like, she looks like the damn devil there. But I say that in a good, believable way for as far as performances go. No, Vika is amazing. She is a well-versed dancer, and she actually gave me ballroom dance lessons after our film. And then there was Olivia Wolniak, who played the Japanese commander, Kumi Wakabayashi. You can tell where I got that name from, right? Kumi Mizuno and Akiko Wakabayashi. So, and she was a joy to work with. She was, at times when I was stressed, she was always like the most calming individual, and she would bring levity with jokes and be like, "Hey, we're having fun. You're doing a great job." And yeah, I missed that with her. JD1, the guy who was in the background, he was also a very great joy to work with. And you know what? I feel bad I didn't have many lines for him. I wish I had. And looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, I should have given him more lines. And Aaron and Jesse Heminger, my friends from Michigan, they are part of the Michigan Ghostbusters, but they wanted to help with my film, and they were naturals at acting already. And I stood up for their wedding afterward from the film. I love those guys. I miss them every day. We live so far. And then Linnell Bridges, who played the one of the guys who was hurting the escaping crowd, but then he unfortunately got blasted by Godzilla. That was I always loved working with Linnell. Great guy. And like I said, the Kaiju police, who were working the crowd too. Brent. I'm Brent Young, who is no longer with us. Unfortunately, he passed away. Jeff Bean Green and Scott Martin and Jen DeFada, all great people. And sorry, I'm not trying to forget anybody. I'm trying to remember everybody. Who am I missing? Why am I missing Jade as the Shobijin? I doubled her to have twins. I'm getting there. But yeah, Jade was amazing as the Mothra Fairies. And then there was Joe Flores as the SWAT guy, and I'm forgetting her name. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. My mind is just stretched far in. But the other SWAT girl, she was amazing. And her daughter even doubled as the Mothra Fairies from the back because Jeanette was unavailable for the last shoot I needed. So I used her for the back shot. And oh man, I hope I'm not missing anybody. But no. Why am I forgetting? And James, please don't kill me. But Yuki in the Mechagodzilla suit. He's actually a takeoff of Yuki from Space Godzilla in another dimension. I always thought he looked so much like Yuki. I'm just calling him Yuki. And he was, and even his attitude reminded me so much of Yuki, the badass in Space Godzilla. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie, but I love Yuki in that film. I think you can agree. A great stoic character. No, I thank all of them. I can't thank them enough.
There are two people in the film that we haven't addressed yet that I wanted to pick your thoughts on. So your fan film does have the rare privilege to have two Kaiju alumni actors. You have Robert Scott Field, who prior to Battle Royale, he appeared in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Now, since Battle Royale, he has appeared in, if I remember correctly, he appeared in Hoshi 35, Kaiju Island of Fire, and I think he appeared in God Raiga versus King Oga and Nezura 1964. But you do have him show up, and then you have legendary Showa actor Akira Takarada. How did you get them? And as being one of probably only a handful of people to say you directed kaiju actors, seasoned kaiju actors, what is that like?
It was not something I expected would really happen, but I've told the story many times, but I'll tell it here again. Robert Scott Field is really the one I have to thank the most, but I also have Paul Gavins and J.D. Lees to thank for this too, because they were also kind of involved in it too. Now, I had been asking Robert, I've been telling him about my project and asked him if he'd want to appear in it. He's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. But then I got word that Akira Takarada was visiting again in the 2012 G-Fest. And then I kind of picked Robert's ear. I was kind of being annoying, and I'm like, Robert, any chance you could put in a good word to Akira Takarada for us? But I also heard that I think Paul Gavins was also kind of picking his ear about it too, unbeknownst to me. But I recently heard on one of his panels that he had also been talking to him, but I wasn't aware of it. But as far as my dealings, I asked Robert myself for Godzilla Battle Royale. Paul was asking for Dojo. Now, when G-Fest, Robert said, I can't promise anything, but I will ask the question. And I didn't want to bother Robert at G-Fest. So when I casually ran into him and when it was the right time to ask, I was just like, just curious, any word on if Takarada wanted to join us for that cameo? And Robert said to something along the lines of, yeah, I think he might be interested. And I was like, oh, I was expecting no. I was literally expecting no. So I would have accepted it if it was no. But then later on, I'm actually doing a panel on the making of my film in the dojo room, and we were kind of taking a break, luckily, during this. And then in walks Akira Takarada and Robert Scott Field. And everybody's frozen because he's usually at his table signing autographs, but he was on a break, and he decided to come in, visit the set, and do those cameos. And I had to stop my panel in the middle of it. I'm like, excuse me, everybody, because they knew it was about to happen. And we shot two things. And also Ben Fariu came in. And you know what? I should have probably had him in my film too. Hindsight being 2020, I regret not asking him to do something too with Takarada. But I didn't quite know what. We were all kind of freaking out at that point. So Paul, we set everything up. We quickly put our lights up, the screen up, and we sat Ben and Akira down, and we did the cameo scene they did for Mecha G Fantas Backfires for Dojo first. We did a few takes, and they had a lot of fun. And then I asked Takarada and Robert Scott and Paul, hey, is it okay if I get that very quick cameo for GBR? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And I gave Robert Scott Field kind of a direction of what I wanted. He translated to Akira Takarada. I mean, he spoke some English, but he still I let Robert do the talking there because I didn't want to. I didn't want to mess anything up with Takarada. I have too much respect for him. But Robert kind of gave him the idea: hold the flash drive up, just tell him we must get this back to the Americans. You understand? And when I called action, I barely processed that I called action for a guy I watched so many times as a kid in these Godzilla films. I didn't have time to process that, but I was kind of thinking it, and my mind was just on overload at that point. And then I felt like a kid again watching him for the very first time in real time act out a scene in a film I'm making. And he just gave this suave turn that he would do in Mothra vs. Godzilla, in Gojira, in Final Wars even. And he just gives the line with such... what's the term I'm looking for? With such old school. It was magic. And when I yelled cut, everybody just applauded. It was one of the coolest damn things ever. And I kept thanking Akira Takarada every time he visited afterward. I thank his family constantly whenever I see them at G-Fest. And I miss him. He's been always one of the greatest celebrities I've met at any of the Comic-Cons or the gatherings or the conventions. The guy loved every single one of his fans. He never wanted to see a fan disappointed. I think any fan can attest to what I'm saying there.
You know, I think talking about the film's production and whatnot, I think ending on that very beautiful note's a good note to end on. Now, before we do wrap things up, we're here because it's been 10 years. 2014 was 10 years ago. I don't like thinking about that personally. That makes me feel awful. But 10 years is a long time. 10 years after the original Godzilla 54, they were making Mothra versus Godzilla and Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, right?
Yeah. And Dogora.
And Dogora. And, you know, even more than that, 6 years. It was a 6-year production, you know? Yeah. So your Godzilla Battle Royale story is now 16 years into the making.
Yeah, even longer to think about that.
I think... I'm going to talk a little bit about what I watched. Now, there's in the film, it feels very much, and this isn't meant to be an insult, please don't take it as such.
It's okay. It's okay.
The film reminds me of late 2000s, early 2010s Godzilla YouTube. It is a time capsule of the fandom. The subtle jabs at Zilla. I know some people get bent out of shape, but it's a funny joke, especially if you were there for that time. It hits home. It hits home.
I feel bad for hurting some Zilla fans' feelings because I've gotten some hate for that, and I was not trying to bash fans who love Zilla. Zilla's not one of my favorite characters, but I have nothing but respect for fans who do appreciate him more than I do.
And I wanted to really kind of get your thoughts overall on the last 10 years, because you and I both, I wasn't in it nearly as much as you were. But we were both there for 2014. 2014 Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards, had just came out. That film had such a buzz around it of itself. It was an important film in the fandom, and since then, we've had this resurgence of Godzilla content, and really 2014 marks, to me, 2014-2015 marked the end of the maybe the second generation of internet kaiju fandom. I wasn't around for the first one with the chat boards, the message threads, Barry's Temple Godzilla, whatnot. But I was there.
Be thankful you weren't.
But I was there for that second wave, and I think we're in either the third or fourth now. I don't really pay that much attention anymore. I'm too busy doing my own thing. But that the film, I mean, you've got names. You've got Samson West, J.D. Lees is in there, John Druney's in there. There's a lot of people attached to that project from that era. We haven't talked about it. G. Fantas is in the short, yes, is in the film, played by J.D., right?
Yeah. Played by J.D. Lees, yes.
Which that in of itself, I think, is also up there as a really awesome feature. Just looking back, Billy, it's been 16 years since you started the journey officially, longer if you take into account how long the ideas had been brewing. 10 years after it's come out, what's that like?
It's kind of like that feeling where the phrase goes, just flew like the wind. But you try to appreciate all the good memories of it. But I won't lie in saying that, yeah, it came with a lot of negative memories that I really did not intend for this film. And I think you can agree that when you put something on YouTube, you're just begging for it to get critiqued, because you got a lot of people out there with a lot of hate in their heart. Whatever they're hurting from or suffering from, they got to take it out on something else. And I seem to be that thing they wanted to take it out on. Whatever their motive was, I can't say. I can't control what people like and what they don't like. I only went into it hoping they would agree with what I did. And a large majority did, but also a large majority didn't. I had people calling me the Tommy Wiseau of fan films. I had people calling me demonizing. I had people calling me looking for attention and all this other stuff. Oh, you can't act. Oh, you can't do this and that. Oh, your effects look horrible, when I know the amount of hours I spent post-wise putting into those shots. It was hurtful to hear. And it still affects me today. Every time I hear how, even when this is used in a positive aspect, I try to accept that it is a positive compliment, but when people call my film campy, corny, cheesy, whether it's good or bad, those were not the aspects I had in mind making this film. This film was a love letter tribute to the old school Showa era and aspects of the Heisei and the era after that, the millennium. I have tried my best to come to terms with those who are saying it in a positive light don't mean it as a bad thing when they say it's campy, corny, cheesy. Those terms have been kind of a trigger for me since I've heard them so much. But yeah, with therapy and all that, I've tried to be more understanding about it. It just, have you ever seen the movie Disaster Artist with Tommy Wiseau?
I've not watched it. It is on my list.
Have you seen The Room?
It's not. I have not. It's on my list.
I don't want to equate myself to the person, but I can relate in certain aspects.
I've seen Birdemic.
Well, I haven't seen that one yet, but I'm not dissing Tommy Wiseau. I have respect for him that he made something that he intended to be interpreted a certain way, but he got the total opposite way he wanted everybody to observe it, but he also found success through it. And I'm not saying I'm exactly like him, but I can relate in the aspect of he wanted people to view his film The Room in a certain unique light of praise. But then when people started hating and laughing on it to the point where, oh my God, this is so bad, it's amazing. And you got people going to the theater still to this day, treating it like it's a Rocky Horror Picture Show, throwing spoons at the screen or going in the aisles and throwing footballs. You know, GBR doesn't quite have that thing to it yet. I don't want it to, but I can relate in that I really wanted people to love my film. I really wanted G fans to see what I was trying to do and pay tribute to all our favorite moments and elaborate on them a little further for the 60th anniversary at the time. But in learning a lesson there, it's like you can't please everybody. Not everybody's going to see it the same way you do. Just because we both love Godzilla, it's a nice dream to think, oh, well, we both love Godzilla, they're sure to like it. That's not true. Because you got so many types of Godzilla fans. You have fans who are more into the historian aspect. There's fans who are more into the toys. There's fans who are more into the film aspect. There's more who are into the artistry aspect. And there's nothing wrong with any one of those areas. So long as you're passionate and you're doing something positive is what really counts. But by the same token, you're going to get hate and critique in all those areas because nobody's perfect.
Well, I don't want to come across as like I'm forcing this out there. You know, this is just something I feel compelled to say right now, and that's, you know, as somebody, I'm a bit of a critic, but I'll say this: when I watched Battle Royale this time around, you know, it's been a while since I have seen it. And I've actually went to school for film since the last time I've seen it. I've shot short films. I've worked on a professional shoot once.
Nice.
There's a lot that goes into film. And, you know, while I am not always the kindest to professional films, I get the sentiment of being able to compliment art and see art for art and realize and actually, like, instead of downplaying it or anything, see it. And one thing that I do want to say is it's truly remarkable that you were able, without really any prior film knowledge, to produce isn't it like an 82-minute movie?
92 minutes.
92 minutes. That is remarkable. That is legitimately remarkable. Because as somebody who understands, it takes me 2 months to shoot a 6-minute short film. You made a 92-minute movie. That is remarkable. I mean that from not only as a Godzilla fan, but a film fan, as a film maker. I don't feel comfortable calling myself a filmmaker.
Neither do I.
But that alone is such a huge accomplishment. And, I mentioned earlier 2.6 million views. That is more than some of the most popular Godzilla YouTubers out there. You have more views on that one video than some popular channels do entirely. And I don't know if this was something you pushed or anything, but there was press. You were on radio. You were on the news. People interviewed you about it and still do to this day. That is such an amazing accomplishment. I think that alone, looking at it, Godzilla Battle Royale's legacy, while there are negative people out there and while there is opinions that are not positive, at the end of the day, Godzilla Battle Royale won. It is such a success in terms of just the power of an artist. That alone, I think, speaks volumes. There's this stigma about kaiju productions that are made by fans. A lot of them fall through. A lot of fan-made stuff falls through, but Godzilla Battle Royale did not. And it still stands. At the beginning of this interview, I read a quote that claimed that it was probably the most ambitious kaiju fan film of the 21st century. I still think that to this day, 10 years later, that statement is still true. Because nobody else has done what you've done to the level that you did, and you had no experience. I would never do that. And I've done film, but I would never do what you've done because I don't think I could do that. And that's amazing.
First of all, dude, you're going to make me cry in a good way. Thank you so much. I don't deserve those compliments, but thank you. Seriously. That does mean the world to hear. And I try to, I'm in therapy now, still over this stuff because I suffer from depression. There's no mystery there. I have felt bad from a lot of the criticism I've taken from the film, and I will take responsibility for some of the ways I did things, which I could have done better. I could have taken my time more. I could have probably watched it back and said, you know what? Even though I liked it right now, maybe give it a rest, wake up and look at it again and see if we could do it better. What you said about it being a win, that's where my therapy is really trying to help me the most, because I feel I always view myself like I haven't won at anything. And you saying that, thank you, because I need to be more accepting of realizing wins, because I guess it gets harder and harder for me as I age to view it that way. And and for any filmmaker, you really have to appreciate the small wins as you're getting up to whatever win you want to get out of this. You can't just keep looking at the end result that you want. I mean, yeah, keep it in mind, but you cannot keep obsessing over it in an overzealous fashion like I did. You have to appreciate the journey. And I did. I tried my best too. But towards the end, yeah, I almost lost my sanity finishing the film up in time for the anniversary. And you just got to take your time and you got to have fun with it. You can't worry yourself sick to death about what YouTube or the fandom or whatever is going to say about you. You have to go from here, and you have to just stay calm and use that Rocky mentality speech that he used in part 6, where it's like, it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, because that's how winning is done.
That's a great note to end on. So I want to say thank you for coming on here, for agreeing to let me interview you, and for saying all the things you said. It's been magical, honestly, to hear what went down, how you did it, and the end result. So thank you so much for being on here. I appreciate it.
Yes. And I also wanted to say one more thing. And I wanted to thank you, Elijah, and Jacob, and Kaiju United for allowing me to help you guys at G-Fest, because that really helped give me some more purpose, some new purpose. And I really hope in the future I can help you guys again.
Well, Billy, I'm more than certain something will happen, and you will be able to do more work. So, thank you again. Before we wrap this up here, is there anything you want to plug? Any self-promotion? Anything coming up you want to talk about?
Come November 3rd, I actually did rent a screen at my local theater, the York Theater, to watch the film again with some cast, friends, family, and yeah, I hope it goes well. Also, I did request for the YouTube reaction couple, You, Me, and the Movies, to react to my fan film. I'm very excited about that, but I also hope they enjoy it as fellow Godzilla fans. So, but I'm also, I understand if they don't like it, I understand, but it is my hope they will enjoy it. And I hope that their fans also will enjoy the reaction. So, but to any filmmakers listening, please just keep going at it. And one other thing, after you complete a project, don't stop. Keep going. Don't stop the momentum, because for a while I stopped there and I lost sight of why I was doing it. So that's the best advice I can give anybody.
And with that, we are done with the interview with Billy Dubose on his 10th anniversary of his Godzilla fan film, Godzilla Battle Royale. It was truly an honor to have Billy on. I remember growing up watching his film, and even now, watching it brought back so many memories, nostalgic moments of the Godzilla franchise and Godzilla fandom back in the early 2000s and early to mid 2010s. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was a great interview. Billy's such a great guy, and honestly, getting to hear these stories and his personal remarks meant the world to me. So thank you guys so much for listening. It was really fun to be able to do this interview and help celebrate 10 years of Godzilla Battle Royale. As for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, that's a lie. I'm reading this off of a MacBook. I need to redo this script. But you can rate us on Spotify. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find all of our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually we'll have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes upload podcast exclusives like bloopers or episodes or even minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Krzyzewski on the channel. I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry about that. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. And not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.